All right, here we are, another episode. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing really well. Is that an Emmy in the background?
It is.
Oh, yes.
It
Tell me
is.
about the Emmy, please.
I started
Hold on.
my,
Move your head to your
oh,
left. Is that a Golden Globe?
no.
Oh, I was like, damn, girl, you have an Emmy and a Golden Globe?
No, that one is
Okay.
a Stevie Award. What is that for? Woman of the Year.
Okay.
Um, I started, one of my first businesses was in media and production.
Okay.
I was working on producing some of the world's first 360-degree interactive media experiences. This was like 10 years ago, with a brilliant business partner of mine, Vincent Marconi. And we had an opportunity to do this project called Out My Window. And it was 13 people living in high-rise buildings around the world, and how our lives are so different depending on where we live. But at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be loved. And it was a really beautiful project that we worked on with the National Film Board of Canada, and it's considered to be one of the world's first 360-degree interactive films. And we ended up winning an Emmy for that, and have an Emmy nomination for another project that we did too. So that was
That's
pretty
cool.
cool. It was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's
That was
cool.
almost 10 years ago, very early in my career, actually.
That's funny. It's crazy that like how time goes. I was doing an interview with somebody today. They were interviewing me. And I was like, yeah, like a couple of years ago. And like, I was talking about my fight career. And I was like, whoa, hold on. A couple of years ago. I was like, shit, that was 15 years ago. Right.
Yes,
Like,
I do that
yeah.
too. I do that too. It's like, it's all so bizarre to me sometimes. I have a strange relationship to time, and I've always just felt like time expands for me. There's always enough time to do all the things that you want to do. And when I look back over the last decade and everything I've done in my career, it's like, wow, that's a lot for 10 years. And at the same time, some of it feels like yesterday. Some of it feels like just a few days ago or just a few months ago, but it's been years. It blows my mind.
It's crazy. The concept of like a duality, right? And how things can like polarity. Like, how are you doing today?
How am I doing today?
Simply, how are you doing? Like right now?
I am full of joy today.
Yeah, you're pretty good, but you're not that good, right? Because we're stuck in our houses and coronavirus, right? Like we're
That
fine, but we're
that
not really
is
that fine,
that's true.
right?
That's
Like,
true. And what I've learned is that we can be with all of it at the same time. So I have this concept in my coaching methodology too, internal accord. And we create this internal accord instead of discord when we actually accept everything in its totality. So if we're looking at the total and totality, it's like I can feel immense joy today, and I can also feel sadness and grief over what's going on outside, and what people are experiencing right now as we move through this challenge that is this pandemic that we're in.
this challenge is so interesting to me, um, because I just don't get why people are so mad at each other. Like, all right, wear a mask. I get it. Like don't wear a mask. I'll stay away from you. I'll just move away. Like I don't have to yell at you. I wear a mask, right? But I'm not going to approach and scream and yell and know that I'm right in doing so. I just don't understand. I don't understand all the anger.
Hmm. And I've seen it in different pockets that I've been in where that comes out a little more. I think experiences like this, you really get to see someone's colors. You really get to
Yeah.
see where someone is at. It brings out all of you, and I've seen that play out in different ways. Some people show up and they're leaders and they're seeing what they can do, and others are just like angry, and they're taking that anger out on other people. And there's so much happening. And I think it's interesting because people also have this time for stillness and introspection like never before. How often do we avoid being with ourselves and distracting ourselves with all of these options that are available to us in any given time that we don't have access to right now. So people are forced to go within and look at themselves a little bit. And that brings up a lot of stuff for people. So I actually have a lot of compassion for people who are in these states of anger or grief and how they are expressing themselves.
It's very interesting, right? Because I know you're big on the mental health, right, and meditation, and I am as well. I can be a very acute anxiety sufferer. So yes, I've worked very hard on my own personal mental health. And I think sometimes it's exactly what you said. You have all these things that can distract you, like all the way down to what restaurant are you going to eat at tonight? You got a choice of like 40. You're in LA, right? So you probably have a choice of 1,000. But here in Boulder, we have a choice of like 40, 50 restaurants. That's just that can distract you, right? And am I going to do this and here and there? But now we have none of that.
Decision fatigue.
Yeah.
Decision fatigue is huge. And if you look back at stories like of some of the great leaders or people who have built great companies, if you look at or read the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson, you see that he tried to eliminate any decisions that were not important in a day, from what he was wearing to what he was eating. If it was not something that was what he labeled as a decision that was elevating his mission, then he would eliminate all of those decisions, because we are so fatigued. And I think that's something that we can all ask ourselves, like, how are we putting ourselves in situations where we have so many decisions that we are contemplating? How can we get rid of some of those so that we are clear, we have more clarity, and we have more space for actually working on our missions and what we want to show up for in the world?
Yeah, I personally think that but that takes a lot of introspection.
Yes, which
right?
people have to do right now.
Right. Yeah, you have to get in, like, you have to get okay with the shit side of yourself sometimes, right? Like we're all flawed. I don't want to say flawed. I don't like that word.
Perfectly imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect. Yeah, there we go. We all have things that we could do more skillfully. But just be okay with it. Just be okay with that. And I think sometimes some of those things are getting shown to people right now because there is so much stillness that it's being thrown in their faces and they don't know how to handle it. How do you help people with this? Because I know this is something that you do, especially you started, you're big on the female side, getting in touch with yourself a little bit.
So I have a very holistic approach to coaching, and I've studied a lot of different modalities that get woven into my coaching approach. And one of the things that I get people to start with is one of the best ways to start releasing things that are stuck in your subconscious is by speaking to them or allowing those energies to speak. So what do I mean by that? If you are sitting, like right now, a lot of us are in a space of introspection and have been forced into that space. If you drop into meditation, or even if you're not in meditation, but you just feel something coming up, there is grief or sadness or anger, be with that for a minute. Instead of pushing it down, which this is what the distractions allow us to do. The distractions allow us to just put all of that aside and not look at it. If you be with that, even for a few minutes, and I like to ask it, what do you want me to know? What are you here for? What am I not looking at? And I do that through a practice called stream of consciousness writing, which allows your subconscious to release what it's holding on to. So let's say that you have this energy of anger coming up. You're feeling really angry. Be with that. Drop into the anger. Where is the anger in your body? Let's say it's in your gut. It's in like your middle belly, your abdomen. It's in your gut. And once we start to label it, we actually reduce the power it has, the control that it has over us. So if we can start to say, like, it feels fiery, it's filling my whole tummy, and we just start to recognize it and be with it instead of repressing it, we're actually giving ourselves space to feel it so that it doesn't end up becoming stuck in our energy system. And then you can ask it, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to know? Or what are you here for? What are you trying to tell me? When has this shown up before and I've just like pushed it down. And then you use a stream of consciousness writing practice, which is you pick up your pen and you let it all out. You let that anger speak, and you don't take your pen off the paper. Does that make sense? So you start writing, and I set a timer for 2-3 minutes, and I just let it all out. And when you're done with that, you burn it. Instead of reading it back, you can do this in the opposite way with positive emotions, and you can read it back to build evidence of what you're able to do, what you're capable of. But in this case, when it's something that's like a denser, heavier energy, you just burn it, or you cut up the paper, or you let it go. And it's a way for that energy to move through you. And actually, movement is another thing, which is so important. A lot of us are not moving maybe as much as we usually do, but letting the energy move through you and being with it is always better than just pushing it down or trying to avoid it, because then it's going to come back again and again and again until you choose to look at it.
Okay, I'm going to go so many directions with this. First of all, have you been watching The Last Dance on the last season of the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan?
No.
Oh my God, so it was one of the best things I've ever seen. Are you a basketball fan at all?
No, but
all right, well, I'm going to tangent. Well, okay, whatever. Because what you said about the burning it thing was just so
go
good.
for it.
Okay, so the story of it is that, like, so they called the show The Last Dance, right? And ESPN did a 10-part documentary series because Michael Jordan allowed a film crew to follow them in the last season. And that was in 1998. Okay, so, and it's just getting aired now.
Wow.
And they interview all of the guys now, like not all of them, but the main players. Okay. Now. So, like, 50, 60-year-old Michael Jordan is talking about what was 98 and like the whole thing. So anyway, so it's all over. And last night was the 10th episode, the last episode. And it ended with Phil Jackson, who's a Zen Buddhist. He was the head coach, had all of the guys come in, and they knew it was over. Right? It was done. Phil Jackson was moving on. They called one last team meeting, and they all got to read something. And then they they had to take time, write it out, and then read it to the team. And then they put it in a coffee jar and they burned it. And they never spoke of it again. And they all said it was one of the most touching and peaceful and loving and just so amazing, such an amazing experience of the writing it, reading it to each other, and just, it's gone. It's over.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It was so cool. I mean, it was so cool.
I love that.
And I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, and I know he's a piece of shit. Like, I just don't care. I just don't care. But anyway, so where did you get into all of this? Where did this start for you? Like, because I mean, I know where it started for me and this whole mental health stuff. Why? What happened? What, like, did something happen? Did you was it thrown in your face like it was mine, where it was screaming at it that you had to work on it? Why and how?
I guess for me, it wasn't that way really in my adult life. I've had times where I've had what feels like a greater awakening, but from the time I was a kid, I've always felt very connected, and I didn't always understand it. I didn't always understand why other kids around me didn't see the world the way that I did and didn't spend time like contemplating. I did a lot of journaling. I would lay in the grass and look up at the sky and go into these like deep states of meditation as a kid. And I look back on that and I've always asked myself, like, why did I just have that in me? And I was with a Balinese healer, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And he was looking at my feet. Balinese healers, they'll like poke into your ears and like get a stick out and like poke your feet. And it's an interesting experience. And he said to me, so when I was born, I had a near-death experience. I almost didn't make it when I was being born, and I was taken out with forceps, and the forceps ripped off a huge part of my skin on the right side of my face. It took me out like this instead of it's supposed to go around your head, the forceps. So I had this experience, and he picked up on this. I didn't say anything to him, and he was like, "You had a near-death experience coming into this world. And that opened your perspective in a very unique way. And I was like blown away when he said that. And so I don't know, is that why? Maybe. But I've always felt very connected as a kid. And then I did my first meditation retreat as a teenager when meditation was not a mainstream thing at the time. People
How
thought it
old are
was,
you?
I'm 33, and this would
Okay.
have been about 15 years ago. So
Yep.
meditation wasn't like it is today. And people thought it was bizarre that I was choosing to go and do a meditation retreat. That wasn't something people regularly did. So it's just something that I've been called to. And I've always felt deeply connected to something so much greater than myself.
Are you religious?
No, I grew up going to church though. And I asked a lot of questions. Especially into my teenage years. And I eventually left church. I still feel
You're
very,
not supposed to do that.
you're not supposed to do that. And I ask a lot of
Me
questions. So
too.
I got myself in trouble on more than one occasion. And I chose to leave church in my late teenage years. But even now, it's like sometimes I go to a service once in a while, and there's something about it that makes me feel like I'm home. Like there's certain gospel songs and worship songs that like just brings me back to a very positive experience from my childhood. So I don't buy into the dogma of it. I see things a little differently.
I'm trying to learn how to love them all.
Yes.
I'm really trying to learn how to love them all. The Eastern ones, I tend to lean more towards them.
Yes.
I feel like there's less dogma, right?
Yes.
Like there's,
I get that.
they're open for everyone a little more.
And no one principle, ideology, religion, belief system is the whole truth. So
Right.
I've studied integral theory with Ken Wilber, and in that whole framework, they try to map different religions and scientific theories all into one framework. It's fascinating. And they talk about everything being a holon. So a holon is it's whole in and of itself, but part of a greater whole and greater truth. So we all have pieces of truth, but no one person, no one ideology has the whole picture, which is why it's so important that we open our minds and our hearts to other people's experiences, because it's through having those experiences with other people that we get to see new parts of ourselves, or exploring something that might be uncomfortable or might be outside of the ideologies and belief systems that you grew up with. But that's how you get to discover new parts of yourself and be more of who you're meant to be in this lifetime.
There's no stop, right? As long like learn them all and take pieces from each one of them, right? Like there's good in so many things. So why just one, right? Like imagine trying to fit. For me, I guess it's like imagine if you were gay. I don't know. Are you? I'm sorry. And you might not have to imagine.
I actually have been with women before.
Okay, sorry. But imagine them saying you only have to do it the other way. You only have to be with men, right? Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work for that person. So that's how I feel about like the religions. Like, man, I'm so happy if you found one that really works for you. That's great. That's amazing. But something else might work for somebody else, and that could be just as amazing.
Yeah. And can you just be open to all of it? And here's the thing. You don't have to take that on. You don't have to take all of it on, but you can try it on. You can try it on, and you can see what parts of it do work for you or do open something within you that is there for you to explore and to maybe grow from. And then from there, you can say, okay, but this part of it isn't quite working for me. So I'm open to experiencing it all, trying it all. Like I'm interested in exploring every aspect of myself, and I get to explore more aspects of myself by being open to new things that are sometimes uncomfortable out in the world.
For sure. Have you tried psychedelics?
Yes.
Do you like them?
I have tried psychedelics. I do. I've got a lot out of psychedelic experiences, actually. And I Specifically with mushrooms was the first, psilocybin was the first psychedelic that I actually tried. And it opened a lot for me and really opened my heart and my connection with all of life. And I've gone on to try a few others as well. Mushrooms is still my it has still been my psychedelic of choice for what it has allowed me to see within myself and the connection that I have dropped deeper and deeper into with other people, with myself, with my body, and with the world around me.
I'm scared too.
You have not,
I
is
have
that right?
not. No. I mean, so
Okay.
I've done MDMA, right?
Okay.
You know,
In a party setting or a ceremonial setting?
in a party setting,
In a party setting.
like go out and have fun as a kid, you know.
Hmm.
Well, I
And I
guess I
think
was.
it's very different when and I think actually people do in a party setting have experiences that are definitely profound and that really change their lives. When you do that in a ceremonial setting, where there's someone who is holding that space and where you're able to look at, like we were talking about when things like anger come up or grief comes up, if you're in a space where you get to explore that safely, there's a lot of beautiful things that can come out of it. And I think now through organizations like MAPS, they're looking at psychedelics in therapeutic settings. And
Yeah,
there
it's
are
amazing.
therapists, there are psychiatrists and therapists who are, MDMA is one of them. MDMA, psilocybin, and there's others that are being explored, LSD as well, for being able to use those in a therapeutic setting. So I'm very excited to see what ends up happening
No,
over the next decade with that.
me too. I think I'm getting closer to trying, you know, because when I meditate, I can feel sometimes where I can go, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not present.
Mm-hmm.
I guess not. I'm present, but I'm not in I'm not in the same space that I was 15 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. And I can feel that there's more, right? Like there's more to go see, but I can't quite get there yet. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like there's like my fear or my consciousness is holding it back, and I would like to go see what that
Yeah.
is over there.
What's the fear around trying psychedelics for you?
So I can have really bad anxiety, you know,
Mhm.
and sometimes things can go sideways just in general, and going sideways scares the fuck out of me.
Mm.
You know, so
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, this is why I'm so excited about some of this research that's being done, because it sounds to me like you would be a great candidate for doing that in a therapeutic setting. Like if you feel safe and you know that someone's there and like has got you, is
right.
holding that space for you, then that allows you to get more out of your mind and
Yeah,
really
someone's
drop
gonna
into
take
the
care of me.
experience. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not like
And
Sam
that
Harrising it.
safety is so important.
Did you yeah, for sure. Like, did you hear what Sam Harris did this last time? He did, like he hadn't done it in, like, you know, Sam Harris is.
No.
So he used to be a staunch, I mean, he still is a staunch atheist. He was called one of the four horsemen. All he used to do is write books on against religion, but he's kind of moved off that a little bit to just like a thought leader, I would say. And he he did a bunch of psychedelics in his youth, and then 20 years off, and he just did it again where he took 5 grams of mushrooms. I think it's grams, right? That'd be a lot, right? Five.
I'm actually
Yeah,
not sure.
yeah, it's a lot. Whatever, five something, not microdosing. And he blindfolded himself and laid on his bed.
Hmm.
That would then he said it was very interesting.
Wow. And we have places now like Rhythmia, and there are places that you can go in other countries and do this like totally legally and in a setting where you are held
Right.
by someone else, and you can let go of some of that fear. And it's done in a ceremonial setting, which I think really changes it compared to if you've ever done anything in a party setting, which
Yeah.
I actually haven't in a party setting. So
Okay.
I'm not sure what the difference would be, but I know that I would probably be I'd be scared to do it in a party setting.
Yeah, and sure, and that's the only experience that I've ever
Mm-hmm.
had, other than marijuana, right? That I've ever had with drugs is, you know, you're partying. But But yeah, I know I have some friends that have done ayahuasca, and that's in a ceremonial setting, you know,
Mhm.
and the same thing with DMT. So,
Yeah.
but
And I've had experiences with breath work where it feels like a psychedelic experience. Like
mm-hmm.
I can get high on my own prana, my own life
Yes,
force.
yes,
And I love that too. The psychedelics have just shown me other aspects of our nature and of what feels like my highest truth
mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
No,
our
there's a
highest
block.
truth collectively. It's interesting, and it's like you bypass the mind. Sometimes the mind can hold us hostage, you know. And for me, like totally getting out of my mind and just into my physical body and my energy body has opened doors for me and allowed
Yeah,
me to see things and see parts of myself that I'm so happy to get to have a relationship with now. And the connectedness to like people and to things, to nature, has been on a whole new level too since I've tried psychedelics.
yeah. I'm getting there. I'm getting close.
Well, and no, and you like it has to be something that calls you, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
without
yeah.
any pressure. And for me, I knew other people who were experimenting with psychedelics, and even in the spiritual space, people who were going on these retreats, and it didn't call me until it did. And when it called me, it was a very strong calling. It was very clear that it was the right time and that I wanted to do it in a setting where it was ceremonial and where I could do it legally, and where I was going to be like held in a space with someone who was like there to help you like process anything that came up if you needed it.
Sure, they're
So
not
that
tripping balls too,
safety
where it's
is,
like,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
for sure, like that. So that's what I don't
And the
want.
Goop, have you watched the Goop Lab
No.
documentary series so Gwyneth Paltrow did this series for Netflix called Goop Lab, and her and some of her employees, well, she's done some psychedelics, but some of her employees are sent to, I forget where they go. I think it's like Brazil.
Okay.
I think they go somewhere in Brazil for it. And they go and they do a psilocybin journey, a mushroom journey. And it's really cool to watch their insights, but they do it with people who are training as part of this psychedelic research arm as well. So it was cool because you see the process of what happens when you're there with someone who's supporting the experience.
I have a funny story real fast. This was amazing about a mushroom. This was actually LSD. So, my two of my friends are getting married. You know, I'm friends with both the husband and the wife, and he's from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So he's super hippie, right? And she is from like this little town in Colorado, super conservative, like her family, right? Their families. So we're in the wedding, and everyone's giving their speeches, and the tables are pretty divided. Like her family's over here, and his, you know, like, so over here are all the conservative people, and over here are all the fucking weirdos, right? And we're with the weirdos. So everyone gets done, and one of his friends, just a random friend, walks up to the microphone and is like, looks at the wife, and he goes, "Tessa, I know Finney will take care of you, and he'll take care of you no matter what. And I know this. And I know this because there was this one time where we were tripping balls on LSD, and this is at the wedding, right? and and I lost it. I couldn't handle. And he held me, and he petted my head, and he's just going off about how Finney took care of him this whole time. And the funny part was, like, if you looked at like the hippie New Mexico side, everyone was like, "Yeah, man." And if you looked at the conservative, you know, like right wing side, everyone was like, "Who are these people?" Like
Who are these
it
people?
was
Yeah.
so funny. Like it was the best speech I've ever heard at a wedding. It was great.
Wow, that sounds pretty amazing.
It was
And
cool.
yeah, it's wow.
All right. Anyway, I want to steer it back towards you and your path a little bit.
What do
Your
you mean? I
journey.
could talk about psychedelics forever. Um,
So you first started this. I guess you didn't first start, but women take on, or you take on the
she
world.
takes on the
She takes
world.
on the world. Sorry. So what was that initially? And you said before we started there that you've moved away from that. So let's talk about She Takes on the World, how that got started, and
Yeah.
where it is now.
Well, going back about 10, 11 years ago, I was building my media business at the time and really excited about everything I was working on for
You were
that.
young, so 22.
I was young, yeah. And I
Yeah.
was in a pretty male dominated space.
Yeah.
And I started She Takes on the World as a way of sharing my experience being a young woman in business. And it was just a little blog that I started writing that took on a life of its own and became a company in and of itself that was not expected at all. But before I knew it, I was writing a column for Forbes. I was being featured on some of the biggest media platforms in the world, all from this little blog. I became an influencer on Twitter back when Twitter was like a lot of business people and was still in its infancy.
Oh my God, I
And
hate Twitter now.
that I know a lot of people do. You know, I'll always have a love of Twitter just because of starting there
Sure,
and
sure.
who it allowed me to connect to. I got a lot of my early press from Twitter. And then I got a book deal for like it all just took on a life of its own. I was still running the media business. And after a few years of juggling both of those things, She Takes on the World was at a point where it was growing. And I made a decision to actually focus on building it and building out an incubator for women entrepreneurs, publishing books under that brand, doing a lot of speaking and events. And so I focused on it for a few years. And I had that for 11 years when I decided in 2019 that it was time for me to let it go. What I realized was that I was hiding behind She Takes on the World. I had started it when I was very young. I started it when I was in a very different place in my life and in my business, and it felt like it had a brand. It had a certain kind of follower, and the niche was very clear, and I felt like it was one part of me, but it wasn't all of me. I wanted to have a brand that felt like I could go in so many different directions. And I want to talk about things like psychedelics when I feel called to. I would have, even a year ago, not talked about that. Like if you would have asked me that question a year ago, I probably wouldn't have wanted to go there with you. And it was because of the brand that I had and the way that people perceived it and the niche that we were in. And it was just starting to feel a little limiting to me. And even though I would tweak it and I would make it feel like more of me, it didn't feel like all of me. And so moving to nataliemacneil.com and being under this personal brand where now I have different projects, and I'm building an institute called the Institute for Transformational Embodiment. Transformational embodiment is my multimodality holistic coaching model that I use with clients to support them in transforming their own lives, and then also training other coaches as well. So I have different projects now that feel like they're such a good fit under me as a brand, but didn't feel like a good fit with She Takes on the World as a brand, which is why I started to move away from it. And I also work a little bit with men too, and that wasn't a fit either. So for a lot of reasons, I decided that I would stand powerfully under my own name and rebrand under Natalie MacNeil.
I want to know more about She Takes on the World, I guess,
Yeah.
to start. Like,
Yeah.
and why you couldn't do it there as well, other than the male part. Like I get the male part, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not, yeah, you know.
Yeah. So She Takes on the World, I had built with multiple revenue streams, events mostly for women entrepreneurs, books for women entrepreneurs, and different online programs, and an incubator for women entrepreneurs.
What does that mean, an incubator?
An incubator, it was one of the first virtual incubators. So I worked with people in a 1-year capacity. So they would be part of the incubator for a year. And it was a way to accelerate their business growth through my support and support from a whole team of mentors in different areas of expertise. So we supported thousands of women entrepreneurs through our programs and through the incubator. The work that I feel called to now, one of the questions I ask myself often, there's actually two. Would I choose this again? And what is my highest and best use on the planet right now? Would I choose this again is a powerful question for taking inventory of everything in your life and seeing what's there just because you once said yes to it, but it no longer feels in alignment for you.
Holy shit, talk about something that's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
Like how many people are probably doing that now because
Yes.
they've never had time to do it before in their life, right? Like you had all this shit. So, but anyway, go ahead, explain more. Sorry.
The choices that we make are everything. Like the fact that we have the freedom to choose, and not everyone has the freedom to choose, depending on where you live. You may not have the freedom to choose and have sovereignty in your life. For most of us listening to this podcast, we have freedom of choice in some way, shape, or form.
I so disagree with you. I don't believe in free will.
Interesting.
I believe
I'll have
that
to
I'll explain a little bit. I believe that we are a combination of our chemical makeup versus our life experiences. So that like when you got the email, and I'll ask you this question later. When you got the email to come on this podcast, it seems like a choice, but the choice was already made because of everything that's happened to you in your life and what the chemicals in your brain. Like, yes, I know you made a choice, yes or no, and here's the time, right? But I don't think you are free to make that. I think none of us are in a way, but that doesn't absolve us from decisions and choices, right? Because I mean, we still have to deal with them. But it has given me more empathy towards other people not believing in free will.
Interesting. So and I mean, this is the beauty of getting to have these conversations, right? Because we all think differently. And I think that that's an amazing thing. I personally believe that we have choices, and the choices that we're making right now in this moment are shaping our future and what we are creating in our lives. And when I look at all of the choices that I have, my choice to come onto this podcast was I only say yes to a handful of interviews. And when I looked at all the interviews that had been requested, where it felt like the host felt like I would be a good guest, I look at those and I weigh, and I see what you're saying, because my experiences led me to be more attracted to doing the interview with you, maybe over some of the other requests that I received. I powerfully made the choice to be here because I felt a resonance with it. And
okay, I'll ask you now then. So why did you say? Because obviously you just said it, you get a host of things, and look, I mean, when you Google me, you find just pictures of me punching someone in the head, probably, right? I think mostly, like if you don't know who I am, right? Like that's what you find.
I was like, this is an interesting guy. I like what he's all about. I like what he's building with the podcast. I feel like this is an audience where, I don't know, something I'm going to say is going to have value for someone out there. And I make a lot of decisions intuitively as well. So it's not just about, how big something is or how big of a platform someone has. I don't look at all of that as like the first things that I'm looking at. I feel into the resonance, and whether I feel like that's an audience that I would have resonance with, and that I think I could share and inspire in some way, or have a message that would shift something for someone. And I don't know, I felt it with this. And it's a choice. Like I'm very deliberate and intentional about the choices that I make, because that's time away from other things, An hour with you means that it's an hour I'm not spending on my business or somewhere else. And I felt very strongly that this hour with you was exactly where I needed to be for whatever reason, right?
Yeah,
for whatever reason. And so I think that there's truth in what both of us are saying, there's always truth in what there's always truth in everything.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the coronavirus thing that I was talking about earlier. I don't know that I'm fucking right. Like on my free will take, it's just what I think. I'm very easily could be wrong. Like,
and I think this question so that's one of the questions, would I choose this again? And I ask that question because I think too often we get complacent in our lives. We start to go through the motions. And when we start to go through the motions, we're missing out on the present moment. And we are dragging the past into the present, which means that we're losing the present. And we're losing the possibilities for the future when we're just saying, okay, I've already committed to this, so I'm just going to keep committing to it. You know, I'm already in this job, so I'm just going to stay in this job. I'm already in this relationship. I'm just going to stay in this relationship, even though it's not working. So would I choose this again? And if the answer is no, to not just say like, okay, bye, to really intentionally look at that and say, okay, is there something that I could do that would allow me to feel in alignment with that yes, with that choice? So if it's a relationship, what do I desire in relationship right now that would allow me to say, yes, of course I choose this again? So that question for me has been a very powerful one. Would I choose this again? And the other question I ask myself often is, what is my highest and best use? With all the skills that I have, with everything that I've trained in, with the network that I have, what can I be doing to make the biggest impact? And She Takes on the World no longer felt like my highest and best use. And that's why I let it go. I'm working on some pretty amazing projects right now and things that have just transcended that brand. Things that are beyond an audience of just millennial women entrepreneurs. And I know that now is the time that I am being called to share, to weave together everything that I've learned, to alchemize it and to share it with people in different ways.
I liked what you said there at the end. Yeah. What's your best use? You know,
what are the highest problems that I can be solving right now? I want to be contributing to solving things on a systemic level right now. I feel like I have enough knowledge and I have a big enough network that I can be making a bigger difference than what I was making. She Takes on the World felt like, while it did have this like grandiosity to it, and I expanded into that as much as I felt I could, until I started reaching these walls where it no longer felt like my highest and best use.
What is your highest and best use?
I believe that we're always figuring that out, that we are always expanding our capacity. So it's really your highest and best use is about expanding into your present capacity. And as you are in the fullness of your capacity, that capacity continues to expand and continues to expand. So right now, my highest and best use feels like this coaching methodology that I've created that is very holistic and that is multimodality, that weaves in different truths and different models of coaching, and also different aspects of spirituality and different modalities like emotional freedom technique and breath work and meditation and gestalt, and putting those into a coaching methodology too, because so much of coaching is based on the mind. We talk so much about mindset being everything, but when we focus on mindset being everything, we are ignoring our energy bodies. We are ignoring our emotional bodies. We're not bringing in our physical body all the time as well, although some coaching methodologies do bring in your physical state. So I believe that we need to approach it more holistically. And that's the methodology that I've developed that I'm really passionate about sharing right now through my institute. And that feels like highest and best use. Also looking at how I can serve in the world. So in my philanthropic endeavors, what can I do to support people who are solving big problems right now in the world to create the kind of future that I want to see, take shape. And do you know what? A year from now, my capacity in stretching myself out, in going beyond She Takes on the World, and in choosing to step into sharing this methodology and supporting other people in becoming powerful coaches and leaders and transformers for our generation and people who are creating these new paradigms in the world. As I continue to share that, my capacity will expand again. And a year from now, we might be talking and I might be saying, hey, Elliot, a year ago, that was my highest and best use. And now it's this. And I believe that we're on this ever expanding journey that there isn't a destination for.
Yeah, there's no such thing as made it. You never make it.
That's right.
I don't know when you make it. Um, Back up, I don't know, 1 minute when you said where you would love to see the world go. Where would you love to see the world go?
Ooh.
You were talking about in your philanthropic efforts,
Mm.
and you brought that up.
Yeah.
Where do you want to see the world as a whole go?
Okay, this is such a big question. I could like talk to you about this for hours. So, first, I don't believe that this goes back to the beginning of our conversation. We are all holons. We are all complete. We are whole and complete, but we are part of a greater whole. That means that no one person has the whole truth, as we were talking about earlier. I don't believe that the way that I would create the world is the best way to create the world. I believe that leaders, that people who are passionate about bringing about change need to work together and solve problems together, because different perspectives are so important. So um, the way that I want to see the world, I don't think that that would be like the best world ever.
No, it's okay.
I want to make that very clear first. The world that I would like to see is one where we can all see each other's perspectives, where people have an openness to them, an open mind and an open heart, where they can let other perspectives in, that we can look at another person and instead of immediately finding the things that we see wrong with them or wrong with their beliefs, that we really listen to them and see them and have those different perspectives that we get to look at and sit in. From that place, there's so many systemic issues. Like, how do we solve the problem of not everyone having equal opportunity? Especially in this country. I'm Canadian, and I believe that the system, while the system is not perfect, there's more access to opportunity for everyone than in a country like the United States. That's a whole other topic, though, that we could get into. I want to see a world where we care more about the environment, where we don't see ourselves as the most important beings on this planet. One of the things about coronavirus that is really interesting is that if you look at the other beings on the planet, they're thriving while we're inside.
Yeah,
That
they are.
tells us something. The air quality in Los Angeles has been the best that it has been. Like, we've seen the lowest levels we've seen of pollution, as have so many other countries.
Well, you
Like,
saw that map in China after 2 weeks, right?
yes.
Like it was gone.
So
It's insane.
Mama Earth has been happy that we've been inside as humans, and animals as well. Like, we are not the only beings on this planet, and we are not the most important beings on this planet. Waking up into that, I believe, is really important for the future of humanity and for future generations. So companies that are more sustainable and really look at their actions and how those actions are affecting other people. Like, how do we create a more fair and just world, not just for other people, but also for the earth? Like, how do we create that balance? And I don't have the answers to that, but I like sitting down at the table and seeing what we can do in the areas that we have resources in, and seeing how can we all play our part. One of the cool things I have an opportunity to host every year is a group of successful women entrepreneurs on Necker Island, which is owned by Richard Branson. And Richard Branson joins us for our discussions about the kinds of changes that we want to create in the world. And he talked about, this is really interesting from my last experience with Richard. He said that we all have the ability to draw a circle around ourselves, right? So within that circle, who can I support? How can I play my part? For some people, it might be your immediate family. For some people, it's in your neighborhood. Like, how can I support in my neighborhood? For other people, it's I have the capacity to support in my city or in my country or this organization. Or for Richard, he's very passionate about ocean conservation and cleaning up our ocean. So he's like, within my circle and the resources I have, I can support the ocean. I can choose to take on, how do we support our mama ocean. And we can all draw that circle. And what starts to happen is if we draw the biggest circle around ourselves that we possibly can, those circles start to overlap. And it's in that overlap where we have an opportunity to create exponential changes. When I join with you and say, okay, Elliot, like you and I are both passionate about this one thing and our circles overlap here. How can we support each other? And it's about everybody doing their part. We all have access to different resources. We all have our different beliefs, but find something that you're passionate about making a difference in and do what you can, because that's how we create the change. That's how we be the change that we want to see.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna, that was great. Like there's nothing else to say. Like we just need more space for each other. And when we have more space for each other, we're going to have more space for everything.
Yes.
Like it's just this idea that someone is right, like you're right or I'm right, is just, it's gotta take a step back a little bit, it's gotta take we gotta slow down with it.
Instead of trying to be right, try to be more open.
Yeah.
Like let go of right and step into openness instead.
I have a friend who, he is a Buddhist, and we were talking about something the other day and he's like, have you ever noticed how big Buddha's ears are? Like everywhere you see Buddha, he's got these big droopy ears. And it's because he does a lot more listening than he does talking. He's got, and I was like, you never see his mouth open and you see big ears. And I was like, yeah, it was really amazing to just like think about it that way, right? Just like really try to hear somebody else for the point of listening rather than for the point of responding.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Natalie, thank you so much for coming on.
Elliot, this was so fun. Thank you, everyone who has been listening to this conversation. I have really enjoyed myself today. My joy levels are even more elevated now.
I hope when you ask yourself, would you do it again, that the answer is, yeah, you don't have to answer. It's okay.
Absolutely. Would I choose this again? Hell yes.
Well, good. I'm glad. Tell everyone where they can find you, social media, your website, all that stuff.
Yeah, I am at Natalie MacNeil, and MacNeil is MacNeil. Natalie MacNeil on social, on Insta. Send me a DM. Let me know your biggest takeaway from this episode, and you can also come and check out my work and my coaching and my books at nataliemacneil.com.
All right, Natalie, thank you very much, and to everyone listening, as always, guys, you all have a unique power. It's not Natalie's power and it's not my power. It is your power. So go out there and find it. Go out there, discover it. It might be scary. It might be difficult. It might be challenging, but it will be so worth it. Go out there and find your power, everyone.
Yes. Amen.